Hello, everyone. It's Laurie and Jenny again. And today we've decided, people are always asking, how do you learn astrology? How do you learn astrology? And I find myself, and I think Jenny probably is on the same page with me on this, is, the first thing that I want to encourage people is don't spend all your time on the internet. We really, in order to really learn and understand astrology, you got to fall back on books. Your mind works very differently. You absorb information in a real different way. And I just really want to encourage all of us to build our libraries and buy books and read books. Now, we're going to start today. We're going to recommend a few beginning astrology books. I think we're going to probably do a series of these, and we'll bring in some more advanced books as we go. But for today, I think we've chosen 3 different books to talk about. Jenny and I each were going to pick 2 beginner books to talk about. And since we picked one book in common, we're going to start with that one, and then we'll each share a different book that we would recommend. So Jenny, what's our first book?
Our first book is The Inner Sky by Stephen Forrest. This is my version of it. There's Laurie's. So this is a great beginner book, and it's one of those books that you just keep on picking up and referring to because there's so much good information in it. It was published in 1988. There's a series of other books that are also named The Sky. So there's like Sky Mates and The Changing Sky and Yesterday's Sky, which are all different astrology topics. And Stephen Forrest has produced a lot of other books. He's done quite a few different books over the years, and he's done a couple, like he's done the Book of Neptune, the Book of Pluto. I think he's doing an elemental series right now. Maybe he has published the Book of Fire already.
Yeah, I think he's put out a few of them already.
Yeah, so he's got quite a few going. I mean, the reason why I really like his books is because his language is so clear and it's easy to read and it's eloquent and it's fun. It's kind of storytelling-ish. And it's just very well laid out and easy to grasp. So I think if just in a quick summary is that. What about you, Laurie? What do you like most about his work?
Well, it's funny because The Inner Sky is a book that I have it's always the first book I recommend to every student. And for me, it's because, his languaging, he's almost poetic in the way he brings in descriptions. And I find myself here, so many years later, with all these images in my mind that I know are straight from his book. I've got little images like whenever I think of Gemini, I always think of him talking about a jigsaw puzzle factory explosion and the twins running around gathering the pieces. And just like so many of those kind of little images that I picked up in this book because I've used it so much with students. I've read this book, I don't know how many times. I've bought 1 million copies of it. And, some people don't like it, but most people really can resonate with the way he kind of spins these pictures with his words.
Yeah. So, a little more about what to expect if you read this book, or we hope that you do. Essentially, it's a basic overview of astrology with his philosophy, his kind of metaphysical approach. And then he goes into, planets, signs, and houses, like kind of the basic bits, and really lays those out nicely. And then he takes a little bit further and offers a few nice sections on interpretation. So he adds in rulerships and nodes and stelliums, kind of gives you, I think he's got 3 different sections on interpretation. So not only does it kind of lay out the basics, but it gives you those first steps towards how to synthesize the pieces together, which really is the art of astrology and really the hardest part, and takes as really a lifetime practice of weaving those things together. So that's kind of what you can expect if you look into the book, and lots of just nice little touches about the way he describes everything.
Another thing I wanted to say with him is he really respects the process of learning astrology in a way. I remember him talking in this book about, if you get too anxious because you're trying to put so much information, go make yourself a cup of tea, sit down. He talks about the faucet, letting out just a little information at a time. And I think overwhelm as you're studying astrology is such a real problem for so many people. And he kind of smooths that out in the way he encourages you to make a cup of tea and think about the faucet and all that.
Yeah, and actually that reminds me, I mean, one of the things that he really kind of goes into is he's very much a proponent of free will. Like, I mean, he looks at your life as sort of an architecture to your life, but he's also very much like, it's up to you to decide, like, if you're going to take action on X, Y, and Z. And so exactly in his approach to astrology, like, you are the one that has your hand on the faucet, so you control how much information comes. And so he's very much about that empowerment piece, and using just that you have the choice of how you want to do it.
And I also was thinking about, when he talks about the signs, he goes through all the different, he talks about the symbol of the sign, the end point, what the purpose of the sign is, what the strategy is, what the resources of the sign are, and what the shadow of the sign is. So for each sign, he goes through all of those. For the planets, he goes through the function, the dysfunction, and the questions of the planets. And then with the houses, he talks about the terrain of the house.
That's right. Yeah.
How it's going to look if you have successfully navigated that terrain, and if you have unsuccessfully navigated that terrain. And that's just so helpful to kind of see both sides, the more positive and the more negative of each sign, of each planet, of each house. He did a really good job with this book.
Yeah.
To me, he's done so much work since, but this is really, he did a hell of a great thing. And he's also the one, that little archetype sentence with the sun, moon, and rising comes right out of this book.
Oh, yeah.
Which is where you just use the archetypes for the signs to create a sentence that says, who you are. How's it go? What's your sentence, Jenny?
Oh, let's see. I wasn't ready for that question. What's the framework? Like, what's the sun?
Okay, so
you are the blank with the heart of. No, it's not the heart of.
I always say the heart of, but he said the soul of.
That's right. The soul of. Yeah, and then showing the face of the.
Right. So it would be like the sun, the sun being in Leo would be, I'll just do mine rather than doing yours. Mine would be the performer for the Leo sun, with the heart or the soul of whatever the moon is, the archetype for the moon, and then wearing the mask of the archetype for the rising sign.
Which is?
So, well, I got embarrassed and didn't really want to say it. But my sentence would be the performer with the soul of the pioneer, wearing a mask of the perfectionist, or the analyst, let's say that.
Yeah. Nice. Yeah. Well, I am also the performer. I'm also Leo. The performer with the soul of the catalyst, which is Scorpio, showing the face of the guardian, which is Cancer. So, yeah.
So, that's a great thing to think about, the archetypes and to use those to kind of create. I got so stuck on that because my son at the time when I first had this book, he was probably about 8. And everybody he met, he wanted to know, what's their sentence? Yeah. So I got into such a habit of using that. But at any rate, highly recommended for anybody that's learning astrology, even if you know quite a bit. It's so useful to have the pictures in your mind that he manages to spin in such a beautiful way.
Yeah.
Okay.
And I just wanted to say one more thing about his book, which is a lot. I mean, there's a lot of things you could say, but I really like how he weaves in the astronomy of the astrology. I mean, he doesn't go crazy with the astronomy, but he lays it out and is just like, this is the framework, and then explains the difference between how astronomy is this objective viewpoint of looking at physical things, and actually the viewpoint from astronomy is as if you're outside of our solar system looking into it. And he kind of, and that's what you're seeing when you see diagrams in an astronomy book. You're thinking at that point of view of planets revolving around the sun, and that astrology, by contrast, is much more concerned with subjective, and the subjective in meaning, and that it's from the point of view of Earth. So it has this geocentric viewpoint, and is very much more about personality and the symbolism. So he talks about it being parallel but two distinctly different solar systems, and I think that that's such a really great way to kind of have that, and to understand that you should know the astronomy, and you should be aware of the astronomy, and you should be able to look up in the sky and look at objects in the sky and know what you're looking at, as an astrologer, and then you're also concern yourself with the symbolic language.
Yeah,
and I think it's super important.
yeah, and he talks
Yeah.
about, you know, the seasons with astrology, and how that really is such a huge factor. I mean, we're not following the constellations, we're following the seasons, and he talks about that and all the way that he just describes all this stuff, which is complex stuff. He manages to describe it in a way that I think a 12th grader could easily, or a ninth grader could easily comprehend and read that book and get a lot out of it.
Yeah. And I mean, he also has a great description of retrograde, which is pretty cool, for folks to look at.
Yeah.
And I mean, and the other thing is, he always has a great example in the back of his books. Like, he will really break down an example after giving you all the information at the end.
Oh,
and
that's
right. Really cool to see. That's a fun part of it.
Doesn't he use John Lennon in this?
Yeah.
I think I think I wasn't supposed to tell people that, because he goes through the whole chart before he tells you who it is.
Spoiler alert, I have to delete the video.
Yep. Spoiler alert.
But anyway, there's that one. So that's that, The Inner Sky.
Yep. Awesome book.
And do you want me to go next?
Sure. Why don't you talk? What's your next one?
Well, I picked up a book called Use Your Planets Wisely by Jennifer Freed.
I have never read that book.
And I picked this book up and I thought it was really useful. Jennifer Freed, I believe this is her first book. It was just published in 2020, so it's a brand spanking new book. So it's a book that is really aiming at the psychology sort of self-help department. So this book is not just, hey, I want to learn astrology. This book is like, okay, I know a little bit about astrology, but how does it pertain to me? Like, what can I learn? What do I need to know about myself? So it really has this, is a practical psychological book, and that's the genre. I just want to say too, there's a lot of emphasis right now on ancient astrology and Hellenistic astrology, and none of the books we're reviewing here fall into that category. So and this is just a very psychologically focused book. So I just wanted to let you know about that. What I liked about this book, I mean, it really just focuses only on the planets. So it isn't a big complicated, I mean, there is an explanation of the planets and the signs, but it's really just the chapters are based on the planets. So it keeps that very simple and focused. She really goes into like expanding astrology beyond just your sun sign. So this is really trying to move you beyond the pop astrology. But you could be a person who only knows like pop astrology, and you could pick this book up and start to understand. And that's what's cool about it. It bridges that gap. What else about it? I mean, I like her viewpoint. She looks at, so similar to Stephen Forrest, she looks at there being like a primitive version of, let's say, your moon in Scorpio or whatever the sign is. And then there's an adaptive mode, so that's kind of the middle mode, and then there's an evolving mode. So she really speaks to the different levels that are available, and the primitive is really like survival mode. And we probably all can see ourselves in each of the three, because there's times in our life when we're just surviving, and then there's times when you're kind of maintaining your status quo and it's okay. but you're just kind of staying the same. And then there's times in your life where you're really dynamic and evolving. So I think that really gives you something to work with. She also has some new, let's see, she's got a couple new things in here. Like, I think one of my favorites is this idea of your rising sign being a window. So instead of it being just a mask, which she kind of talks about that in here, it really goes into, it's a window in both directions. It's what you look out of, it's what people look in to see you. So it's just a really nice, fresh, new look at older stuff. Yeah, I like, she talks about the moon as the tides, the sun is the taproot, and she kind of just goes through like each thing, like Venus is the garden. So just some really nice viewpoints. Yeah, but it's designed to be very practical and usable. And at the end of each chapter, she has a section for you to work with it. There's like a journaling and suggestions for how you could work in a group with certain things. So
nice.
Yeah, like it's really just meant to be a user-friendly guide, and I think that's pretty cool.
That's great.
So yeah, I think, do you have any questions about it, Laurie?
No, I don't think so. It sounds really interesting. So it's mostly focused just on planets.
Yeah, so
that's interesting.
Yeah, so each chapter, like, she kind of goes in the introduction, and then the sun is the taproot, the moon is the tides, the ascendant is the window, Mercury is the wind, Venus is the garden, Mars is the bonfire, Jupiter is the high mountain lake, Saturn is the mountain. And she includes Chiron, which not everybody does, is the gnarled tree.
And I like that.
Yeah,
I like that.
It's just so she just goes into the archetype and the mythology a little bit, just a little touch on the mythology, so just so you understand how it ties in with these are ancient ideas.
Cool.
And then just to finish up, Uranus is the lightning bolt, Neptune's the wave.
Of course.
I know, zap. Totally is. And Pluto is the volcano.
Nice.
So I think my favorite two things about this book is just that very practical approach of how to actually use these different things. And then I love how she brings in the likeness to nature, these different natural components. So I think those are my two favorite things about it.
Awesome.
So yeah,
that's awesome.
Check it out.
That's great. Okay, is it my turn?
It's you. You're on. What do you got?
Okay. Well, what I've got, and we used that 1988 book of Stephen Forrest's, and now you brought in a new book. And this other book that I'm bringing in is also a new book. And it is called Astrology, in big letters, Using the Wisdom of the Stars in Your Everyday Life. It is by a woman named Carol Taylor. It is, 2018 was when it came out. And I'm embarrassed to admit, I don't know if she has other books. I'm pretty sure that she was on Chris Brennan's podcast recently.
Yeah.
And I think that's where I heard about this book, and I ordered it because it sounded so interesting. And I was surprised when I received it, because I didn't realize when I ordered it that it's actually a hardback book. Mm-hmm. And one of the things I love about this book is the feel of it, the size of it, the book itself, and the visuals. I mean, this is an incredibly just dynamically beautiful, well done book. I don't know if you can see all that. And I think that's important, because one thing that became really evident to me recently with a particular friend of mine who seems a little interested in astrology, but not really, but was visiting my house. And I have this big, like what do they call them? A coffee table book by A.T. Mann called The Round Art. It's an old astrology book, but it's a great big, like a coffee table book. And it's similar to this in just the diagrams and the pictures, and it's just so visual. And I saw this friend of mine just get lost in it. And I realized how much certain people are so visually inclined that having that it's a lot easier to learn when there's pictures and colors and things you can connect with visually rather than just pages of text. So that I thought that was really interesting, and this book just kind of pulls you into a different level of engagement with it. Now, all of that would be useless if the information wasn't good, right? But it is. It's an extremely, extremely good book. It covers all the, astrology through the ages. What is astrology? It's basically from the perspective of psychological astrology. And, it goes through all the signs, the planets, the houses, the birth chart itself. And then about the second half of the book, it's very interesting how it breaks it down. There's one section called Understanding Yourself and another section titled Life Events. So you can look at this and you can say, okay, life events. You've got this whole list, everything from taking a risk to changing careers, to relocating, to facing retirement, to bereavement, parenting decisions, all these different things. And you can turn to that page and it tells you step by step what houses to look to, what signs are important in that contemplation, and just what's important to look at in your natal chart in that contemplation. And the same with the Understanding Yourself. It's got sections on romance, sections on marriage, sections on uncertainty and habits and leisure and all of those things. So it's really, really practical. You can learn a ton with this book. Now, one other thing, actually, just at this point, do you have any questions, Jenny?
No,
about
I don't.
it?
I don't have any questions. I'm excited to get it though. I think I'd like to order this book.
It's it's just beautiful and so engaging. And I think my favorite part of what I've looked at in this, I have not read this book cover to cover, but this one part called The Astrological Mindset. How do astrologers think? And it says here, in order to fully appreciate and work with astrology, it is necessary to suspend our conventional way of thinking. Well, that's pretty clear. I think I have a phone here ringing.
Yes.
Sorry about that. As a philosophy, astrology belongs to a magical mindset that sees Earth as a reflection of the heavens. You do not have to be a philosopher to use astrology, but it is helpful to understand a little of its underlying view. And then it goes into 3 different kind of ways of thinking about this. The first one is to think of astrology as the whole concept of as above, so below. And the second one is the macrocosm and the microcosm, thinking of life from those terms. And then she talks about just the nature of symbols and understanding, how symbols work in our minds. And I love this book. Go buy this book.
Yes.
Carol Taylor, beautiful book.
I did listen to her interview with Chris Brennan recently, and it was great. It was really cool. It was a lot of her. It was the one about aspects. So it was a really nice interview about understanding aspects. It was about like T-squares and grand trines and
that's right,
and so on. Yeah, and she was very well spoken and very interesting to talk to. And I think that this book, she talked about it a little bit, and I think it was a collaboration, like where I'm not sure if it was the publisher, but or an astrology group that basically handpicked her to write parts of it, and there's a different artist, and so it was like this collaboration. I want to say it was I don't know if it was the Astrological Lodge in London, but I'm not sure. With some group of astrologers.
Well, there's certainly are an awful lot of people involved in this book.
Yeah.
That's for sure. I mean, there's, senior editors, there's just a lot of people involved. The illustrations are by someone named Keith Hagen.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I think what's interesting, like about all three of these books that we talked about, is these were all pretty psychologically focused,
Yeah.
and we
Yeah.
certainly recognize there's other ways of looking at astrology. But it's really nice to think about how these different things can help people and help them reframe their lives, and how you can buy these books yourself and look at your own life, or you could use them to enhance your astrology practice, or even if you're just doing amateur astrology, just working with friends and so on, or if you're trying to do it more professionally, they're all very useful books.
Yeah.
And I totally agree with you about having books on the shelf, and having an
Oh,
astrology library is key.
yeah.
And it's also great to support other astrologers. So that's kind of
And
how.
it's funny because I hear, sometimes I've had students and they're reading this book and then they're reading that book and they're reading some other book and they see things that contradict and they get nervous about it. It's like, it's okay. Just absorb it all.
Mm-hmm.
Because I feel like the point isn't to find the exact right answer to whatever Venus in Virgo in the eighth house.
Yeah.
You're not going to, there's not going to be a one exact thing that's going to mean. It's a symbolic language. And the more of this stuff you absorb from different people, from different books, different understandings, different lines of astrology, even like the real traditional ancient astrology or the psychological astrology, all of them can teach us something.
Mm.
And as we absorb more and more from all these different areas, our own voice will rise, will take that and rise into our own understanding.
Yeah,
But we've got to
absolutely.
absorb a
Yeah.
lot.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and you find your own way through. You find your own true path, your own true voice for you,
Right.
and it's not going to be the right path for anyone else necessarily. It's just you weeding through. So
Yeah.
great.
All right. Well, I think that covers that. And I've got a million other books we can talk about. I bet you do too.
I do.
Yeah. I like doing
Yes,
this. This is really fun. And I'd like to continue doing more of these.
that sounds
So
good to me. I'm game.
thank you, Jenny.
Yeah.
And if anyone out
Laurie?
there has a book they want to recommend to us, let us know.
Absolutely. Thank you
Okay.
very much.
Thank you, Jenny.
Thanks, Laurie. Bye.
Bye.